In the year 1066, England stood at a crossroads. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14th, would determine the fate of a kingdom and change the course of history. This clash between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans was more than just a struggle for the crown. It marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new order that would shape England for centuries. England in the mid-11th century was a powerful yet unstable kingdom. King Edward the Confessor, revered for his piety, ruled over a land that was rich in resources but fraught with internal divisions. The absence of a clear heir to the throne only deepened these tensions. As Edward's health declined, the question of succession became increasingly urgent. Various factions within England vied for power, while across the Channel, Duke William of Normandy watched with growing interest. His claim to the English throne was based on a promise Edward allegedly made years earlier, a promise that would soon plunge England into chaos. Upon Edward's death in January 1066, Harold Godwin's son, the Earl of Wessex and one of the most powerful men in England, was crowned king. Harold was a skilled leader and a seasoned warrior, but his claim to the throne was far from uncontested. His coronation sparked anger across the Channel, where Duke William of Normandy was preparing to enforce his claim. According to Norman sources, Harold had previously sworn an oath to support William's bid for the English throne, an oath allegedly made under duress but nonetheless binding in the eyes of the Normans. William began gathering an army, intent on taking what he believed was rightfully his. Even before William's invasion, Harold Godwin's son faced another dire threat from the north. Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, also laid claim to the English throne, citing ancient Viking ties to the crown. In September 1066, Hardrada landed in northern England with a formidable force, quickly seizing the city of York. Harold, with astonishing speed, marched his army north and confronted the Norwegians at Stamford Bridge. The ensuing battle was brutal, but the English emerged victorious, effectively ending the Viking Age. However, Harold's triumph came at a cost. His army was depleted, and he had little time to recover before news arrived of William's landing in the south. On September 28, 1066, while Harold was still in the north, William's fleet landed at Pevensey Bay on England's southern coast. The Normans quickly established a beachhead, constructing a motte and bailey castle to secure their position. News of William's landing forced Harold to march his tired troops southward with all possible speed. His journey was grueling. After days of hard marching, Harold arrived near Hastings with his forces diminished and weary. Despite the odds, Harold prepared for battle, determined to defend his kingdom from this new threat. The battlefield at Senlac Hill would become the site of one of the most consequential battles in medieval history. Harold's forces, heavily outnumbered, took up a defensive position on the high ground, forming a shield wall, a tactic that had proven effective in the past. The English army was composed mostly of housecarls, professional soldiers, and the FYRD, local militia called up in times of need. Facing them was William's well-organized army, consisting of infantry, archers, and the feared Norman cavalry, each trained to fight as a cohesive unit. As the sun rose on October 14th, both sides prepared for a battle that would decide the future of England. The battle began with a volley of arrows from William's archers, followed by an infantry assault on the English shield wall. But Harold's forces stood their ground, repelling wave after wave of Norman attacks. The shield wall, a solid line of interlocked shields and spears, seemed impenetrable. As the morning wore on, the Norman cavalry charged repeatedly but could not break the English line. At one point, rumors spread that William had been killed, causing panic among the Normans. But William, lifting his helmet to show his face, rallied his troops and urged them back into the fray. The battle was far from over. In a decisive move, William ordered his troops to feign a retreat. Believing the Normans were fleeing, a portion of the English forces broke ranks to give chase, abandoning the protection of the shield wall. This was exactly what William had planned. The Norman cavalry quickly turned and counterattacked, cutting down the isolated English soldiers. With the shield wall weakened and gaps forming in the English line, the Normans intensified their assault. As the day wore on, the tide of battle began to turn in William's favor. As the battle reached its climax, King Harold fought with unmatched bravery, trying to rally his men. But then, in a moment that would become the stuff of legend, Harold was struck by an arrow. According to some accounts, it pierced his eye, delivering a fatal wound. With their king fallen, the English forces lost heart. What had been a disciplined defense dissolved into chaos, and the remaining English soldiers were overwhelmed by the Normans. By the end of the day, the once mighty Anglo-Saxon army lay shattered, and the field belonged to William. With Harold's death and the collapse of the English resistance, William's path to the throne was clear. However, his victory at Hastings was only the beginning. Over the next few months, William marched through southern England, facing little resistance as towns and cities surrendered to his forces. In December 1066, he arrived in London, where he was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. The Norman Conquest had begun, and England would never be the same. The Norman Conquest reshaped England in profound ways. The introduction of the feudal system transformed the social structure, with Norman lords replacing the Anglo-Saxon nobility. Norman castles, like the Tower of London, sprang up across the land, cementing William's control. The English language itself began to change, absorbing thousands of Norman French words. This cultural fusion laid the foundation for the modern English language and identity. The events of 1066 would echo through the centuries, influencing everything from architecture to governance, and leaving a legacy that endures to this day. Although William was crowned king in 1066, his control over England was far from secure. Over the next decade, the Normans faced fierce resistance from the Anglo-Saxon population. Rebellions erupted across the kingdom, from the northern shires to the Isle of Ely, where the legendary Heward the Wake led a final stand. William responded with brutal efficiency, most notably in the harrying of the north, where entire regions were devastated to break the will of the rebels. By 1070, through a combination of force and strategic alliances, William had crushed the uprisings and solidified his hold on the throne. To consolidate his rule and manage his new kingdom, William ordered an unprecedented survey of England in 1085. Known as the Domesday Book, this meticulous census recorded who owned every piece of land, what it was worth, and how much tax could be levied. It was both a tool of governance and a symbol of Norman control. The Domesday Book provided William with the information needed to administer his realm effectively, and ensured that no one could challenge his authority without consequences. This monumental record remains one of the most valuable historical documents from medieval England, offering a glimpse into the lives of people over 900 years ago. The Norman Conquest brought profound changes to English society and culture. The new ruling class spoke Norman French, and over time, it became the language of the court, law, and the church, blending with Old English to create Middle English. The Normans also introduced Romanesque architecture, characterized by grand stone cathedrals and castles, replacing the wooden structures of the Anglo-Saxons. The legal system evolved, combining Norman feudal law with Anglo-Saxon customs, laying the foundation for English common law. These changes marked the beginning of a new English identity, one that merged the traditions of its conquerors with those of its past. William the Conqueror's legacy continued through his descendants, who ruled England for nearly a century. His son, William II, known as Rufus, faced challenges in maintaining his father's legacy, while his other son, Henry I, brought stability through legal reforms and administrative efficiency. The Norman dynasty, however, was not without strife. Disputes over succession led to a period of civil war known as the Anarchy during the reign of Stephen, William's grandson. Despite these conflicts, the Normans left an indelible mark on England, strengthening the monarchy and establishing the foundations of the centralized state that would emerge in the centuries to come. The Norman Conquest did more than transform England, it altered the balance of power in Europe. With William's victory, England became linked to Normandy and, by extension, to the complex politics of France. Over the following centuries, English kings would lay claim to vast territories in France, setting the stage for conflicts like the 100 Years' War. The conquest also established England as a significant player in European affairs, shifting its focus from a regional power to a kingdom with continental ambitions. This expansionist mindset, born from the Conquest, would shape England's history for centuries, leading ultimately to the British Empire. The Battle of Hastings was more than just a moment in time. It was a turning point that changed the course of English history. The Norman Conquest brought profound political, cultural, and social transformations, many of which still resonate today. From the language we speak to the legal systems we rely on, the legacy of 1066 endures in countless ways. As we look back on this pivotal event, we see not just the end of one era, but the beginning of another, an era that set the stage for the modern world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most pivotal moments in history, the Battle of Normandy. If you found this exploration of history insightful, there's so much more to discover. Our world is filled with stories that shaped the past and continue to influence the present. Make sure to subscribe to Historical for more in-depth looks at the battles, leaders, and decisions that changed the course of history. By subscribing, you'll stay connected with the past and better understand the world we live in today.